The war in Ukraine is not just a simple conflict between two neighbors. It is a global proxy war. In many ways, it kind of is a new world war, which is, of course, very dangerous. We have so much evidence proving that Western governments have been directly involved in this war, fighting against Russia. And a new report in the New York Times admits that the CIA and special operations forces from numerous Western governments, including Britain, France, and Canada, are physically on the ground in Ukraine, coordinating with Ukrainian fighters, training Ukrainian fighters, advising the Ukrainian military, overseeing tens of billions of dollars of arms shipments and military equipment, and also directing intelligence. So really, what this report shows is that the proxy war in Ukraine is being directed by the US and other Western allies. This is not, again, a war, a simple battle between Ukraine and Russia. This is a battle between Russia and NATO. This is really a kind of world war, and Ukraine is simply the site where that war is being waged. And of course, the US has made it clear, and NATO has made it clear, that they're willing to fight until the last Ukrainian in order to bleed Russia. The defense secretary and former Raytheon lobbyist of the United States, Lloyd Austin, said that the US goal is to weaken Russia. And that's exactly what the US military and the CIA are doing, not just from abroad, but on the ground in Ukraine. I wrote an article about this over at multipolarista.com. It's titled, CIA and Western Special Ops Commandos are in Ukraine directing proxy war on Russia. This is a photo of Ukrainian soldiers firing artillery. And again, this is all according to a report in the New York Times. The report reveals that the CIA is on the ground in Ukraine, along with special operations forces from numerous NATO members, including Britain, France, Canada, and Lithuania. These forces, these Western forces on the ground in Ukraine, are training and advising Ukrainian fighters. They're overseeing weapon shipments and managing intelligence. And again, we're talking about tens of billions of dollars of weapons sent by the West, including from the US, at least $50 billion in U.S. assistance on the books. This New York Times article also reveals that at least 20 countries are part of a U.S. Army-led coalition that is guiding Ukraine in its fight against the Russian troops. And another explosive detail about this is that some of the Ukrainian fighters even have U.S. flag patches. That is to say, they're using gear, equipment that has the U.S. flag on it, as if they were U.S. soldiers. So again, this is all according to a report in the New York Times, which is a de facto voice of the U.S. government. It's basically state media. It's technically private, but it closely follows the propaganda line of the CIA and the Pentagon. And this story is according to anonymous U.S. government officials. Everything in the story is according to U.S. government officials. So even though the newspaper is technically private, it comes from the mouth of the U.S. government. This is the article in the New York Times. I have it up at archive.today, which is a good way to get around paywalls. The title of the article is Commando Network Coordinates Flow of Weapons in Ukraine. The subtitle is A secretive operation involving U.S. Special Operations Forces hints at the scale of the effort to assist Ukraine's still outgunned military. And it notes here that Ukraine, quote, depends more than ever on help from the United States and its allies. And then it says, quote, including a stealthy network of commandos and spies rushing to provide weapons, intelligence, and training, according to U.S. and European officials. So again, this report is what you would call in the media a controlled leak. So sometimes there's information that is secretive leaked from the US government, but it's done with the consent, or it's done by Western government officials or from the CIA itself. It's very likely that this story is based on controlled leaks from people in the CIA. They're releasing this information because it serves their interests. It's a form of information warfare against Russia. But this is not, some kind of plucky, intrepid investigative reporter at the Times who's reporting something that the US government doesn't want the public to know. It wants the public to know the US government is leaking this information. Here are a few highlights from this article. It's a long article, but here are some of the main highlights. The chief of US Army Special Operations Command boasted of, quote, an international partnership with the Special Operations Forces of a multitude of different countries that, quote, have absolutely banded together in a much outsized impact to help wage this proxy war in Russia. So again, I need to stress this point. The Western propagandists trying to portray this war as, the tiny country of Ukraine against the big Russian bear. That's propaganda. They themselves, these Western government officials, are boasting of working with dozens of countries and having a much outsized impact. This is a proxy war on Russia. The article also noted that this is a quote, CIA personnel have continued to operate in the country, that is Ukraine, secretly, mostly in the capital, Kiev, directing much of the vast amounts of intelligence the United States is sharing with Ukrainian forces. It also revealed that the U.S. Army has a, quote, coalition planning cell in Germany to coordinate military assistance to Ukrainian commandos and other Ukrainian troops. And at least 20 countries are part of this U.S. Army-led coalition planning cell. They're providing military assistance to Ukraine. And, quote, and it was, quote, modeled after a structure used in Afghanistan. So the U.S. military and NATO, dozens of countries are using a command structure like what they used in Afghanistan in order to wage this proxy war on Russia via Ukraine. And the New York Times acknowledged that this 20-nation U.S.-led coalition, quote, is part of a broader set of operational and intelligence coordination cells run by the Pentagon's European Command to speed Allied assistance to Ukrainian troops. Again, this is a proxy war. What they're describing is a kind of world war, a massive international alliance of 24 countries and NATO led by the U.S. to wage war on Russia via Ukraine. And then here's this incredible quote that I highlighted. I mean, this is really, it says so much symbolically. In a battle in the eastern Donbass region, quote, a group of Ukrainian special operations forces had American flag patches on their gear. They have U.S. flags on their gear. It's a perfect symbol of who's really in charge of this proxy war. And these Ukrainian special operations forces were also, quote, equipped with new portable surface-to-air missiles, as well as Belgian and American assault rifles. So, as I note in this report, there actually have been several articles in mainstream media outlets acknowledging CIA support for anti-Russian forces in Ukraine. I've done videos about this here, and I've written articles about it at Multipolarista. Here is an article from March in Yahoo News, a total mainstream media outlet. I mean, this article also is based on controlled leaks from inside the CIA. So the CIA wanted this information to be released. This article in Yahoo News is titled, Secret CIA Training Program in Ukraine Helped Kiev Prepare for Russian Invasion. And once again, this is from the mouth of the CIA itself. And you can see here, I wrote an article about this at multipolarista.com titled CIA has trained Ukrainians to kill Russian speakers since 2014 US-backed coup. And this article reveals in Yahoo News that CIA paramilitaries have been traveling to Ukraine since the US backed the coup in 2014 to overthrow the elected government. And it noted that there is a, quote, covert CIA training program run from Ukraine's eastern front lines. So this is happening inside Ukraine, and it's training Ukrainian special operations forces in, quote, irregular warfare. And the CIA acknowledged that it has sent, quote, tactical specialists like snipers who also work for the CIA Special Activities Center, and the CIA is helping to develop secure communication systems for Ukraine. And an anonymous CIA agent acknowledged in this Yahoo News piece that, quote, our job is to have an exponential impact on the Ukrainian forces. Now, this is not the only mainstream article acknowledging the role of the CIA in backing Ukraine in its proxy war against Russia. Here's an article that was published in Yahoo News by the same CIA water boy. It's titled, CIA-trained Ukrainian paramilitaries may take central role if Russia invades. Note, this article in Yahoo News was published in January 2022. So this was published over a month before Russia even invaded Ukraine. So this is direct acknowledgement that the U.S. was preparing for a war with Russia before Russia invaded. It's yet another example that the U.S. in many ways wanted this war in Ukraine. I wrote about this also at multipolarista.com in an article titled, CIA is training Ukrainian paramilitaries to, quote, kill Russians. And this article in Yahoo News, it pointed out that this operation began in 2015, and this was an operation based in the United States. And the article in Yahoo News admitted, quote, the CIA is overseeing a secret intensive training program in the U.S. for elite Ukrainian special operations forces and other intelligence personnel. A CIA agent admitted, quote, the United States is training an insurgency. Again, this was a month before Russia invaded Ukraine. And the CIA admitted that its goal is to teach Ukrainian fighters, quote, to kill Russians. Again, here's the quote directly from the Yahoo News article published a month before a month before Russia invaded Ukraine. And I noted in this article that to understand Moscow's perspective on what's happening in Ukraine, imagine this scenario. What would the United States do if Russia orchestrated a violent coup d'etat in Mexico, the southern border of the U.S.? This is what the U.S. did in Russia's neighbor, Ukraine, in 2014. And then after this U.S.-backed coup in Mexico, Russian spy agencies spent years and billions of dollars training Mexican gangs to kill North Americans and then sent them to the U.S. border to fight a, quote, insurgency against the U.S. That is what the U.S. has been doing in Ukraine since 2014. One Yahoo News article admitted that the CIA has been on the ground, on the front lines in eastern Ukraine since 2014. The other Yahoo News article admitted that the CIA has been training Ukrainian special operations forces in the United States since 2015 and sending them back to Ukraine to kill Russian speakers. And then finally, this latest report, this June in the New York Times, further admits that not only the CIA, but special operations commandos from multiple NATO member states, including Britain, France, and Canada, are also on the ground in Ukraine, helping to oversee, to direct this proxy war on Russia. I repeat, this is not a war simply between Russia and Ukraine. This is a Western proxy war on Russia.